Hello, IB English students. Welcome to the higher level essay introduction video. I'm going to go over the basics as well as the changes for the 2020-2021 school year here very briefly, and then I'll talk about each one of these bullet points in turn as well. So first, the essay needs to be between 1,200 and 1,500 words using formal academic language. Your essay will be based on a text that we studied together in the course. So for our class, that would be either Stamped, The Things They Carried, A Doll's House, The Awakening for first semester, or Perfume, Antigone, or that choice of Watchmen or V for Vendetta. You, the student, will select the topic of the essay, the title, as well as the line of inquiry and the thesis for your essay. You cannot repeat a text that you used in the individual oral on your higher level essay. So we'll have to make sure that those are different. And then normally you wouldn't also be able to use that text on your paper 2 at the end of the year, but they've changed that. We don't have to worry about the paper 2, right? We're only focusing on the paper 1 exam at the end of the year. And for this essay, there's no need to consult a secondary source. You can just write all of your own original analysis. So there's no research involved. So let's talk about the 1,200 to 1,500 word formal academic essay first. I will be monitoring the word count, so please make sure that you are doing that as well. It helps to kind of do that periodically while you're writing. I'll be providing guidance on writing the outlines as well as common grammatical errors within the essay and how to avoid them. And then when they say, excuse me, it needs to be an academic essay, what they mean is you need to avoid using conversational writing as if you were talking to a friend, as well as including a works cited page at the end of your essay. I will be putting together a how to works cited page and how to use Noodle Tools video, and I'll be providing you with that soon. The next thing, right? It needs to be, excuse me, it needs to be based on a text that we studied together in the course, right? Semester A's texts are on the left, semester B's texts are on the right. So what we are doing in our class and the way I've structured our class is you're going to write outlines for all of the semester A texts except for Stamped. We just don't have time for that one. And you're going to write an essay for each text that you don't end up using in your IA, right? So during that week of testing, when I'm working with you on your IA, if you're not currently doing that IA with me, or if you're finished, what you'll be working on is writing an essay for the 3 remaining texts. Semester B, you'll also write outlines for all of the texts that we study, but you're only going to write 1 essay. That'll leave you with 4 choices at the end of the year to kind of choose from as far as which essay do you want to put forward as your submission to IB. So your topic selection, right? So you will select the topic, the text that you want to use, the line of inquiry, and your thesis. And I wanted to just take this time to go over each of those lines of inquiry with you. So they are identity, culture, creativity, communication, transformation, perspective, and representation. Let's take a look at each one. So from the curriculum guide about identity, right, it says the student might be interested in an aspect of the representation of identity of a particular character or group of characters in the text, or the way in which the text relates to the identity of the writer. So some sample theses that you could be using, right? Michael's shifting view of himself from blank to blank in blank's novel might be, you could fill in the blanks with whatever it is that actually makes sense. I just use a random character name. His shifting view of himself from, child to man of the house, or whatever the case may be, and then you would insert the title of the author's name and the title. Another thesis might start off looking something like this, similarities between insert an author's name and her character blank, right? So I think these are pretty self-explanatory. These are not the only thesis statements you could use, but I just wanted to give you a sample of what a thesis statement might look like with this line of inquiry. For culture, the curriculum guide suggests or says, the student might be interested in an aspect of the representation of the culture of a particular place, institution, or group of people, or on the way in which the text itself relates to a particular culture. Again, some sample thesis that you might want to use. You could focus on depictions of masculinity within blank culture in, such and such as play. Perspectives of, insert that specific cultural group before and after the publication of blank's novel, right? It may be that the author wrote something, that was so impactful that people started to look at that culture or aspects within that culture differently. And that could be something else you could write about. Creativity says the student might be interested in an aspect of the representation of individual or collective creativity or lack of creativity within the text, or on the way in which the text represents the creativity of the writer, right? And so for this one, I wanted to provide you with kind of questions that might help you generate your own thesis. So for example, how does the author adhere to the conventions of a genre and for what purpose, right? Why did they decide to do to construct their work the same way that everybody else has ever constructed their plays or their novels, etc.? And then conversely, how does he or she deviate from those conventions and for what purpose, right? If everybody else writes plays a certain way, but you come across an author who writes them very differently, that's tapping into that creativity, right? Setting themselves apart. What was the purpose and drive behind doing that? So these are questions that might help you generate a thesis using that line of inquiry. Communication. The student might be interested in an aspect of the representation of acts of communication or failures in communication in the text, or on the way in which the text itself represents an act of communication. Right? Again, some thesis generating questions. What theme or lesson is the author trying to convey, and how did they do that? Right? How was that communication being done? Is it through certain devices? Is it through repetition, and et cetera, right? That'd be things for you to consider. Or another question that might help you generate a thesis is answering the question, how is communication explored within the text? It may be that the author's point is that there's many different ways to communicate, or one way is more valuable or more effective than another, et cetera. And that would be something that you would have to kind of ponder or think about when trying to use that as your line of inquiry and creating a thesis. Transformation is a little more complex. So if you take a look what the curriculum guide gives as far as guidance is concerned, it says the student might be interested in an aspect of the representation of transformation or transformative acts in the text, or on the way in which the text itself is a transformative act, either of other texts through intertextual reference to them, or of reality by means of transformative effect on the reader's identity, relationships, goals, values, and beliefs. This is probably the most complex one, but boiling this down to its basics, right? A student might be interested in how, exploring in their essay, how a character changes or transforms from the beginning of the text to the end of the text. They also might be interested in how the act of reading the text might change or transform the reader. I went into the text thinking X about the topic, and now that I've finished reading it, I believe Y, or I understand Y, etc. So for this line of inquiry, some sample theses I wanted to give to you are these. Insert your author's name. So blank depicts such and such's transformation from blank to blank to convey, and then insert that specific message that the author has for the reader about transformations, right? So I'll just make it up. John Smith depicts George's transformation from down and out, down on his luck guy to successful business person to convey. And then you would fill in something about this transformation, to convey you should never give up, right? Everyone can change their situation in life, et cetera, something to that effect. And then again, if you're not focusing on the character and you want to focus on the reader and how that experience of reading the text was transformative for them, your thesis might look something like this, right? The author's text blank transforms the reader's perception of insert that item by, and then explain how that item or that thing is transformed, or their understanding of that thing is transformed. So blank's text, insert the text, transforms the reader's perception of, racism in America, ideas about justice, ideas about patriotism by, and then fill in how are those things transformed or manipulated. How does the author do that for the reader? The next line of inquiry is perspective, right? The student might be interested in an aspect of the representation of a particular perspective or perspectives within the text, or on the way in which the text represents the writer's perspective, right? So again, some sample theses. The author blank's choice to write the story from such and such's perspective, and then insert that effect, right? The choice to write it from this woman's perspective has this effect or this impact on the reader, blah, blah, blah. Or an author uses blank as his or her mouthpiece to voice his or her thoughts on, and then insert the topic. Again, Jane Smith uses Barbara as her mouthpiece, right? Her representation of herself in her own words, to voice her thoughts on, and then insert that topic. Voice her thoughts on sexism, to voice her thoughts on whatever the case may be. And then the last line of inquiry is representation. So the student might be interested in an aspect of the way in which the text represents different themes, attitudes, and concepts, or on the extent to which language and literature can actually represent reality. Right? Again, this is one that kind of requires that you do a little thinking and they all require thinking, but you may need to ask yourself some key questions to generate a thesis. Some of the questions I would suggest are, how does the author present conflicting perspectives on blank, right? How do they show two sides of a debate? What limitations and or advantages come with writing about blank in this format? If I wanted to write a book about a particular topic, let's say racism, what are the advantages and disadvantages of writing about it in the form of a play, in the form of a history book or a nonfiction text, in the form of whatever it is that case may be, the text format. And then the last question to help you generate a thesis for this line of inquiry: how and for what purpose does the author depict blank the way he or she does? Right? How is a particular character represented, and what's the point of representing the character that way? So when it comes to that last one in particular, sorry, I didn't mean to say characters. You might want to talk about groups of people. So for example, you could say, how and for what purpose does the author depict men the way he or she does, or women, or youths, right? Younger people, or the elderly. How and for what purpose does the author depict the rich or the poor, the educated or the ignorant or uneducated, etc.? This is not an exhausted list, right? You can kind of keep going with different groups, but it may help you to kind of think of larger groups of people, not just one individual character. A couple reminders, right? And this was stated earlier, right? Whichever text you choose for your IA, you cannot write a higher level essay for it as well, right? It's gonna basically, you get to use the text one time for official purposes, and then you don't get to use it again. Additionally, right, you need to consult. There is no need to consult a secondary source. Like, you don't have to find other academic essays about the topic you're writing about or about the book that you're writing about. But you can do that if you would like. However, that's where plagiarism usually catches people, right? That's where they used something that didn't belong to them, and if they don't cite it properly, they end up getting a 0 because it looks like they're trying to just pass off somebody else's work as their own. Again, I went over how to avoid plagiarism lesson early on in our course, I would strongly suggest that you go back and revisit those things before consulting a secondary source to use in your essay. Okay, so your next steps in getting started, right? I've provided for you a sample higher level essay that a student wrote about the things they carried, and you can go ahead and read that. That is completely optional. You do not have to do that if you don't want to. I just wanted to provide you with something as a concrete example of what it is that I'm going to be looking for. That essay itself is not 100% perfect, but it is very strong. And I'll include the marking scheme, right? All the feedback that comes from the official IB board when they graded it. Some questions that you should ask yourself before you start thinking about this outline for your higher level essay for the things they carried. The first one I would suggest is asking yourself, which line of inquiry interests you the most, right? Of all of those 7 topics that I listed, and the thesis generating questions, etc., which of those kind of appeals the most to you? Which topic could you write about at length, right? Which topic do you think that'd be very easy for you to write 1,200 to 1,500 words about? And then what are at least 3 scenes from the things they carried that you could use in your essay? You're able to use more than 3 scenes, right? That way you can reach the 12 to 1,500 word count. But it would also just help if, as you're considering, what line of inquiry you want to do, can you narrow it down by yes, for this line of inquiry, I can think of 3 scenes very easily. If that's the case, fantastic. I would suggest you start your start your outline. If you're struggling, if you really like that line of inquiry, but you're struggling to come up with 3 examples to use, you may want to put that line of inquiry off to the side or dedicate more time to doing that research and figuring out what scenes you want to use. Once you've done these things and once you've asked yourselves these questions, and just do it on a scrap piece of paper, right? It doesn't have to be anything official. You're going to need to watch the higher level essay outline, explanation, and backwards planning demo. That's another video. It takes about 14 minutes and it explains exactly how to go about completing your higher level essay outline. In addition to that video, you'll be working on, this is the outline that you're going to receive. And I've improved the outline a little bit by making things easier for you. You'll notice that I've gave directions about how you need to use full sentences when answering or completing the parts that are highlighted in yellow. I've also added hyperlinks. I don't know if this will work. It should. I've also added hyperlinks to resources about how to write effective transitions, as well as how to write an effective call to action. I think if I click on this now, it'll take me out of my presentation. But they're embedded within your outline so that you can access those to make things easier for you. And that's it. Thank you for watching. If you have questions after viewing this video, please send them to me through the Zoom chat. Or if you have questions outside of class time, please email me and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can.